Hey, good morning, everyone. Joshua Severe Weather. Happy Thursday to you. We still have some action in the tropics to talk about, although things are a little quieter than a day ago. And I think that continues into November. Also, big changes coming in the U.S. as some early winter now hitting the west and the northern U.S. is going to march south and eastward here this weekend and early next week. And we're going to go from shorts to heat in a short order here early next week. So I'm going to share my screen. We're first going to talk about tropics and where the next storm may come from. It is potentially a threat here, not just to Mexico once again, but also to Central America, maybe the Western Caribbean, Cuba, maybe even some other spots. We've got kind of a combination of remnant depression, which is flaring right back up here in the Eastern Pacific off the Central American coast. As well as moisture coming across the central Atlantic, which will move into the Caribbean here this weekend and early next week. And we're going to have to keep an eye on how this all evolves. The water temperatures are very warm, some very high oceanic heat content. Doesn't always mean we're going to have a Category 5 due to the fact that the waters are warm. We need to have ideal conditions when it comes to wind shear and moisture, but certainly the odds favor something more significant. I'm also going to talk about what's going on with the remains of Tammy, which is no longer fully tropical, but still an entity out there. So here is a look from Zoom Earth at our current satellite, and we are tracking 92E, which has an 80% chance of becoming another tropical system here in the next week. We are also looking at Tammy, which is post-tropical, meaning that it is losing the warm core that tropical systems have and merging with a front, but still producing some powerful wind and rain just to the east of Bermuda over the next few days. Here's a look at the infrared image. And let me make this a little bit bigger for you guys so you can kind of follow along at home. And you can see really just two areas to keep a close eye on. One off the coast of Guatemala and El Salvador. This is our new invest in an area of very warm water, high oceanic heat content, and favorable moisture. So definitely something we're going to have to watch, and something that could, once it finally organizes, could go to town here and intensify pretty quickly. We're going to have to keep an eye on that. And here is still a hurricane in wind speed, but not so much tropically classified as one, but Tammy, which has given forecasters some fits here as to where it's actually going to go. It has come a little farther north and east, which is better news for Bermuda, certainly better news for the Bahamas, but it's still going to be out there for a while and circulating. So we're going to talk about that. Keep an eye on this upper level low right here to the east of the islands. Nothing of great concern at this time, but that moisture eventually does track westward into the Caribbean next week. We're already starting to see some thunderstorms flaring up here in places that really haven't seen a lot of rain this summer and fall between Colombia and Venezuela and Hispaniola. So we are going to have to keep an eye on that. Here's a look at Tammy. Winds are still of tropical, actually really of hurricane force, 75 knots, 85 miles per hour, moving north at 12 miles per hour. It's about 400 or so miles east-southeast of Bermuda. And the Hurricane Center has stopped basically putting out an APB on it, no longer has an actual forecast. But I'm going to click on it and just kind of show you what they're showing. And it's a spanning area here of tropical storm force winds, but you can see just a giant circle of uncertainty. And that's unfortunately what we're dealing with here, something very uncertain. But the fact that it's gotten this far east is certainly better news for Bermuda and certainly for the East Coast, as right now the trend is our friend in that the strongest wind, the heaviest amounts of rain are going to remain east of Bermuda as we get to this weekend. So no hurricane watch is expected from this system unless we get thrown a curveball, which we've seen quite a bit here this tropical season. Here's a look at why we have to watch the Caribbean. It's been pretty much untouched this season for the most part. Obviously, the islands have gotten hit, but we see water temperatures off of the coast of Honduras that are 31, 32 degrees Celsius. That's about 88 degrees Fahrenheit. And on the Pacific side, you can kind of see where the waters have been cooled from Hurricane Otis. That strengthened very quickly here, kind of in the same environment, low wind shear, very warm water. But look off of the Pacific coast of Central America, from the Gulf of Tehuantepec all the way down to Costa Rica. We're sitting at temperatures well into the 80s. So there's certainly the warm water for it. We just need to get the actual spin and the rising motion. And we are starting to see that a little bit more here. Not an organized system at this point, just a tropical disturbance, but it is slowly pulling southwestward. You can kind of see a bit of a spin here, southwest of Guatemala and El Salvador, south of the Gulf of Tehuantepec. It's got a little ways to go before it becomes anything tropical. We also see flare-ups here, tail end of a cold front, very warm water, still some higher wind shear, though, keeping anything from forming. But we are going to have to keep an eye here on the south central portions of the Caribbean Sea as well. And then our upper level low spinning here over the central Atlantic. That's going to send moisture into the Caribbean as well if it continues on this track. Here's our front attached to Tammy, and you can see all this moisture expanding north and east. So it could be pretty wet in Puerto Rico again, especially the eastern part of that island, as well as the Windward Islands. We are certainly looking at some tropical rains affecting this area, which has been overall dealing with drier than average conditions due to the El Nino conditions we have here in the Atlantic. Here's a look at Tammy, and you can see still a pretty vigorous circulation, but missing convection on the southeast side. This is Bermuda here. It looks like it's going to stay east of Bermuda now. I know a few days ago that was not the trend, but it's gotten a little farther off to the east than models originally thought. I say originally, they thought a few days ago. Things have flip-flopped so much on this storm. And I'm not going to lie, I try to forecast it, but things are out of our hands the way I see it here. But you can see losing that central convection, no longer tropical, but still expanding in size, and a lot of dense overcast on the northwestern side of it, keeping it at hurricane force. And that is expected to gradually weaken as the system starts to make a turn back to the northwest, and will be below hurricane strength by this time tomorrow morning with winds of 65 miles per hour. Here's Bermuda, so not yet in the cone. You can see water temperatures dropping off as well. So this system could still survive. It's merged with a front right now, but it's something we still have to keep an eye on if it tries to detach itself here maybe early next week. But way out to sea, not really a threat to the U.S. Model guidance just makes you cringe, though. You can see ensembles that they generally show this turn back to the west and then spinning around and making a loop just south and east of Bermuda, not actually landfalling on the island. But you can see there's some potential for it to kind of re-strengthen if it kind of detaches itself from this abusive relationship with this front here. I don't joke about those, but I mean, it's not going to be able to hold on to tropical characteristics because it's being choked off by this front. But it could break free at some point here next week. If it doesn't, there's a bit of a trough and a bit of a weakness that may try to push that remnant circulation back to the west, but it's going to hit another cold front that's getting ready to move into the eastern U.S. around the 31st and November 1st. So generally speaking, weakening is expected here, and that's going to continue. Now in the Eastern Pacific, not worrying about this yellow area, but we do have an 80% chance of another tropical system. The next name on the list is Pilar, P-I-L-A-R, a female name. And you can see it's kind of forming in the same spot where Otis formed. Does this get to category 5 in less than a day? Really tough to even try to speculate that at this point, but it's going to be in a spot where it certainly could try. So we're going to have to keep an eye on it. I don't think models are going to handle it very well, but what I'm watching is more of the kind of the upper level picture here of what's going to be happening. And we're going to see a big front dropping down. So that's going to prevent it from going into central Mexico like Otis is. In fact, the remains of Otis have fallen apart, but the moisture is spreading into Texas, where heavy rains are going to be a problem here in the next couple of days. It seems like this time of the year when something comes in and hits Mexico, and we've seen 3 of them now, really 4, Lilia, Max, Otis, Norma hit the Cape, or Cabo San Lucas and moved in. All that moisture gets spread into Texas, where the rain is certainly, I don't want to say welcome. Nobody wants heavy rainfall, but certainly is needed to help ease the drought. You can see that moisture now moving up into South and Central Texas. But here's our spin that we're watching, and right now it's getting bigger in size, but it's not consolidating, which is good news, but also bad news in that it's growing in size. Deep thunderstorm convection moving away from the Pacific coast, and we're going to have to keep watching it. I still think it's a couple days away from becoming anything tropical. The European ensemble guidance shows that this certainly has a chance of becoming something tropical in the Gulf of Tehuantepec. It's also showing some development near Jamaica, which I don't think is necessarily going to be the case, but we need to watch. What's probably more likely is that this Pacific system takes over, creates wind shear in the Caribbean, but picks up that moisture. And at some point next week, we might have to see something crossing over into the Northwest Caribbean. So taking a look at the European ensemble guidance, we kind of can see, let me loop this for you guys. I forgot to do that earlier. And give me just a second. You can kind of see the uncertainty level growing, though, unfortunately, which you often see this time of the year. Here's a look at the Eastern Pacific, all kinds of solutions. The European showing something maybe trying to form off the Colombian coastline here and drifting north. But in reality here, I don't think we've got a tropical system moving across Cuba into the Bahamas next week. There is an opening in here, but I think the wind shear is too strong. What's more likely is something here becomes stronger than predicted and gets drawn poleward, and it may come across Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras, hit some mountains, weaken, but try to reform. The ensembles show it moving southwest here, but I would not be shocked to see it get pulled away to the north and east if this front is stronger. And if that's the case, we have to keep an eye on the Northwest Caribbean where waters are very warm. You can also see Tammy looping around, trying to become tropical again. We'll see. This is something to watch in Bermuda, but there's just so much time out here for things to change. So here's a look at the GFS operational from earlier today. This is our global model and shows a weakening Tammy near Bermuda, falling apart, then drifting and circling back around to the south and west. It is not showing development in the Central Caribbean. It is showing, though, our system 92E becoming a hurricane south of El Salvador over the weekend and then turning back. And what we have to watch is that the pressures are still low down in here in the Caribbean. It is possible something tries to get going. Now, the GFS is trying to pull this system from the Central Caribbean in, and unfortunately is choosing violence here in the Western Caribbean in about 10, 14 days. I would not necessarily believe this one particular solution. The GFS has a bias where it can do that. I saw a couple of days ago something try to come across in the South Florida. But obviously, with this system out in here, if it doesn't die and comes across, we're watching the Northwestern Caribbean. And we're keeping an eye on South Florida and the Bahamas, Cuba, and Jamaica at this time of the year. Here's the upper level pattern. And you can see just way too many players on the map to make any kind of official call at this point. And it's just highly unlikely this time of the year that something crosses the Caribbean and develops in November like this. Typically, what will more likely happen is that a piece of moisture or a piece of energy splits off of a Pacific system, gets caught in the gyre, and maybe if it sits over the Northwest Caribbean for a while, can become something tropical. We have seen that happen several times, but the odds of it affecting the U.S. are getting smaller and smaller, with the exception maybe of deep South Florida and the Keys and the Bahamas and Cuba, which isn't the U.S., I realize, but is in that general area. So here's what we're looking at with 92E and still a ton of uncertainty. This was kind of the case with Otis, if you guys remember. A lot of ensemble guidance and tropical guidance pulled it away to the west, kept it pretty weak, but they did not model it to be strong enough. It eventually got pulled northward. Here you can see the tug is more northeastward, so we have to keep an eye on things here in about 6 to 8 days. GFS Ensemble does have some solutions that go stronger here. We've got a few at category 2 or 3. Again, until it forms, this is not going to do a great job at picking up what's actually happening, but certainly the pattern is there for something to develop down there and potentially become a strong system. Sorry about that. Here's a look at the upper level pattern from the European Ensemble. You can see big ridge of high pressure in place across the east. I've talked about this for several days, but I realize some of you may be visiting for the first time. So the general pattern shows a big shift coming where we're well above average through this weekend across the central and southern and eastern U.S. and much below average in the Rockies and northern plains, eventually the Southwest. But take a look here at this ridge building into the Pacific next week. The brighter colors indicate above average air mass where we have strong high pressure aloft, which leads to very warm temperatures. And then you see the darker colors indicate colder air coming down and more unsettled weather, typically speaking. And as we head on into next week, we do see this ridge breaks down, and we've got a front that's likely going to sweep across right around Halloween for portions of the deep south and the southeast and mid-Atlantic states. The timing is still uncertain, but it could be anywhere from Monday night to Wednesday night when this front plows through the south and east. And it's going to bring a much colder second half of next week before temperatures moderate over the weekend. This is a more favorable pattern for the East Coast. We've seen a trough in place kind of over the Great Lakes and Southeast for several weekends, meaning dreary, wet weather in the Northeast. This favors maybe some change in that coming where we start to see a decent stretch of a few weekends here, but that still can change, certainly. So I don't know why I got logged out here, but here we go. Here's a look at the GFS. Let's go back and look at the European here real quick, and we're going to loop it. I'm sorry, guys, doing this on the fly here, but you know what? It's okay. We can adapt. Looking at the European, still big snows over Montana, the Dakotas, some ice over parts of Minnesota, even parts of Nebraska. You can see how these lines start stacking up. That indicates a very dense cold air mass dropping south all the way into the Texas Panhandle. We call these systems northers. They're common here in late October, November, early December. But what they do is they change the sky from cloudy and kind of moist and dank to clear and much colder as that dense air takes over. So what we see is this front is moving through the Great Lakes and eastern Canada over the first part of the weekend. And then we see another wave of low pressure bringing what could be a significant snowfall for some here on the Front Range and spreading into the central and northern plains. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Here comes kind of wave number 2, and the timing on it is still a bit uncertain. The European says we've got some tropical moisture here that's going to slow it down a bit, so it may not really get colder in the southeast until Wednesday of next week. It also has low pressure coming up the east coast and upper level low cutting off, and that could mean a significant wet snowfall early this season for parts of New England and the interior of the Northeast, but I'm not seeing this on every model yet. So just something that we're going to be watching here for the middle of next week. And then you can see it's still kind of chilly across the Northeast, but we don't have to deal with rain next weekend. We're actually dealing with warming temperatures. So this cold air that's coming is going to be transient. It's going to move out in about 4 days after being chilly. We do have issues with flooding across Texas that I'll get to. We've got some fog issues as well over the Central Plains. But the thing that sticks out to the most of you is the brighter colors here in the North Central U.S. Significant snow is in place. We're seeing some roads shutting down early this season with heavy snow falling over portions of the Northern Rockies and the Great Plains all the way into the Dakotas. Cold temperatures across the interior of the Northwest as well, but warming up in the east, so we're going to have some pretty good weather. You can see it's been really wet the last couple of days here, especially over Kansas, Texas, up into the upper Midwest. And I'm going to show you all radar-derived precipitation in the Dallas-Fort Worth radar showing amounts that are as high as over 10 inches of rain near Granbury, Texas, actually as much as 11.5 inches of rain. Fort Worth has picked up 5-6 inches of rain, especially on the west side. Dallas starting to get in on that heavy rain, 4 to 6 inches. And unfortunately, more rain coming, starting to spread east of the Metroplex. But we are likely to deal with some significant problems here in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area with rainfall totals of 6 to 12 inches. All that moisture is going to continue to spread north and east. Today, we see 2 areas of excessive rain, one from San Antonio, Austin, Round Rock over to about College Station and maybe Tyler, Texas, also an area over the Lake Michigan region. Tomorrow, things are going to improve in the upper Midwest, but we have another wave of potentially significant rain hitting Dallas-Fort Worth. This could cause some significant flooding, and that expands north and east through Oklahoma into Arkansas and the Ozark Plateau here as we get to the weekend. There is potential to see over a foot of rain in some of these locations here. The rain is needed because it's been kind of dry in Texas and southern Oklahoma, but when you get farther north and east, that's not really the case anymore in the Ozarks. So you can see our 7-day forecast shows some significant rain across this region, whereas the areas that really do need the rain the most, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, are super dry, unfortunately. The east is going to get wet again, especially in the northern part of the country, and Atlantic Canada is going to be pretty wet as well. Here's a look at the region of greatest concern here, the south central United States, and we can see a 7-day forecast, 2 to 4 inches. I do think there'll be higher amounts locally within this, maybe up to 6 inches. And you can thank these Pacific hurricanes for that. They are sending all that moisture through Mexico northeastward into the central part of the country. Let's look at temperatures real quickly here. Very cold with respect to average, feeling like midwinter here in Montana, in southern Alberta. That is going to expand south and east. It's going to wipe out this warmth, but things are going to take their time doing so. You can kind of see the warmth actually builds north and eastward. We're well above average on Saturday on the East Coast. Sunday, we're still pretty warm, but starting to cool down in New England. But take a look at what's coming here through Texas. A drastic drop in temperature by the beginning of next week. This is a look at Halloween, and we are well below average for much of the nation except the West Coast and except the far southeastern U.S., where the high pressure ridge is still in place, but not for much longer. We're going to see chill all the way down into central and south Florida by the second part of next week, and then temperatures start moderating next weekend from west to east. Here's a look at some 24-hour temperature changes, and here's where the drastic change is coming. We're seeing drops of 20 to 30 degrees across the central plains here the next 2 days. That spreads into the Great Lakes, modifies some, but look at this drop coming in New England on Sunday. Saturday, pretty mild. Sunday, much colder. And then as we get into early next week, big drops in temperatures, as much as 40 degrees colder in 24 hours over portions of southern and western Texas, as well as 30 to 40 degrees below average in parts of Arkansas. I don't want to call it a pneumonia front, but it is definitely going to change things up here very quickly here. And that's going to spread south and east. And Halloween, kids that have been wearing shorts for months going to school on Halloween in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama are going to need the coats by the time we get to the evening, as temperatures could drop off into the 40s and low 50s. It's definitely going to feel colder for those of you on the Gulf Coast that aren't used to it. We then start warming right back up, though, as we get towards the end of next week. Here's a look at possible snowfall over the next 10 days or so. Actually, Willie, 7 days. Yeah, 10 days. And you can see big totals in the Rockies, 2 to 3 feet, 1 to 2 feet here in North Dakota, spreading up into northern Ontario. Very heavy over portions of Quebec, but even some snow cover potential all the way down close to Omaha, close to Chicago, into the Great Lakes region here. Some lake snows possible here by the second half of next week. We could see a few inches. Stay tuned on more detail on that. And then here's a look at European model temperatures, and you can see still very warm over the central United States. But here comes our front. This is Friday around dinner time, and we're dropping off single digits in Montana, 20s and 30s in the plains. And then you get down in Oklahoma, and we go from the 70s to the 40s very quickly here as this norther drops south. Take a look here at Sunday, and we can see a contrast from 30 degrees in the Oklahoma Panhandle Sunday morning to 70 near Durant and in southeastern Oklahoma. And here comes the drop into Texas as well on Monday. So Dallas-Fort Worth is going to be in the 70s on Sunday morning and then into the 30s by Sunday night and early Monday morning. It's coming farther south and east as well into the eastern U.S., and I will show that to you guys here in just a second. The cold nights are done here for the most part in the east. We are looking at warm afternoon temperatures. Look at Saturday afternoon here, 80s all the way up to Philadelphia to just south of the Lincoln Tunnel here in New York City, upper 80s, maybe close to 90 in Fort Myers, Florida, upper 80s in interior parts of Louisiana. Chicago, though, is dropping into the 40s here for Sunday. Maybe it gets back to 50, maybe not. Take a look at Monday here. We could go from the 80s in East Tennessee into the 40s here Monday evening and 30s by Monday night. We'll have to see on timing. The European's a little slower than the other models here. This is Halloween evening showing our front. It could be anywhere from the Delmarva and Western North Carolina to as far east as the Southeast coast. So we could still be mild on the Southeast coast for Halloween, but it's possible this ends up quicker and we could end up in the 40s and 50s. Either way, those changes are coming. The timing is a bit uncertain on that. Thank you all so much for your time this morning. I hope you all have a blessed day. Thank you for, if you are a first-time visitor, subscribing. We're still going to talk tropics here for a few more weeks, it looks like, but we are going to also start talking more about winter weather, about temperature profiles, about what to expect this winter as conditions certainly warrant. But I thank you all for your time today. I feel like I've been blessed in less than a year to be able to grow my reach so much, but I don't believe I could do any of that without God. He is, my creator. He is my source of energy. He's the reason I'm here today and that you're here today as well. He's created the heavens and earth. And, for about 30 years of my life, I didn't truly believe that. But the window opened for me to have my heart kind of softened up, to be in a dark spot where I was and see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that is Jesus Christ, our light, our Savior, the one who can save us from eternal death, basically. And the Lord says to us in Psalm 74 through David that the day is thine, the night also is thine. Thou hast prepared the light and the sun. Thou hast set all the borders of the earth. Thou hast made summer and winter. Remember this, that the enemy hath reproached, O Lord, and that the foolish people have blasphemed thy name. O deliver not the soul of thy turtle dove unto the multitude of the wicked. Forget not the congregation of thy poor forever. Have respect unto the covenant, for the dark places of the earth are full of the habitations of cruelty. The Lord has created the earth, but the enemy has reproached, and he has taken a lot of people away and caused darkness, caused cruelty, caused violence. But the Lord is here to save those that have chosen to break out of those strangleholds, to get away from those dark forces, to say to God, look, God, I'm a sinner. God, I'm in a dark place. God, I'm feeling mentally just not well, not there. I'm blaspheming you. I've done all kinds of foolish things. I've done all kinds of things that just don't do anything to improve the earth or our time here on earth, which is not very long. But to repent, turn to God, and do what David did and say, Lord, you've created the day, the night, the winter, the summer, all the borders of the earth. You are the king of our dominion. You are the one that has sent Jesus to die on the cross so that we can be saved eternally if we so choose to accept that gift. And I pray that you do. And if you haven't, that is all right. Not my call, not my judgment, because I was there for a long time. But I do truly pray that maybe you have a change of heart and a change of spirit and do see that God really does want us to flourish eternally and to live with Jesus in heaven one day, and to repent for our sins, because we're all sinners. Those that are believers are definitely sinners. I certainly am one. But I recognize that I am, and recognize that there are greater plans for me. I want to pray for you if that's the spot that you're in right now that you're struggling with, because I truly believe that you still can change and that you still can become a creature of God. So I hope you all have a great day, and look forward to connecting with you again tomorrow morning. Have a blessed day. See you then.